I had just uncorked a bottle of wine from Nova Scotia when Michael's name lit up my phone. My son doesn't disturb family evenings unless something has gone terribly wrong. Michael, I said, a knot already forming in my chest. Dad, I don't know how to say this. His voice trembled. Sienna found your storage unit, the one on King Street downtown. She's standing outside it right now. Dad, she brought bolt cutters. The facility manager called me because the lease is under your name. She told him she's your daughter-in-law and that you gave her access. The glass froze inches from my mouth. 12 years. 12 years of keeping that unit locked down, guarding what Catherine left behind, preparing for the day I always knew would arrive. Has she made it inside? I asked evenly, though I could feel my sister's worried eyes on me. I don't think so. The manager's buying time, saying he needs to confirm with you first. But Dad, she's furious. She's yelling about her rights as family. What could possibly be in there that she wants this badly? Everything, I thought. Every record, every protection, every shred of evidence I might need for a moment exactly like this. Michael, listen to me carefully, I said. Call the police. Tell them someone is trying to force entry into my private storage unit without permission. Then contact our attorney, James Chen. His number's in the desk drawer at home. Tell him it's time. Time for what? In the background, Sienna's voice cut through, harsh, insistent. Is that your father? Tell him I know he's been keeping secrets from us. Tell him I have every right to see what's inside our family storage unit. Our family? The phrase made my teeth grind. Dad? Michael's voice had shrunk, hesitant. What's happening? I'm getting on the first flight back to Toronto, I told him. Do not let her near that unit, and son, there are things we have to talk about. Promises I made to your mother, promises she wanted me to keep until the right moment. I ended the call and immediately pulled up Air Canada's website. Across the table, Margaret studied me, worry and quiet comprehension in her eyes. She had known Catherine well, had sat beside her during those last fragile weeks, when my wife made me vow to safeguard our son, no matter what. It's starting, isn't it? Margaret said softly. She's finally revealing who she really is. I gave a tight nod, my hands unsteady as I entered my credit card details for a flight departing in 4 hours. Catherine predicted this 12 years ago, I said. She told me someone would eventually see Michael not as a man, but as an income stream. The storage unit had been Catherine's plan. 6 months before the cancer claimed her, while her mind was still sharp enough to prepare, she insisted we lease it, not to store old furniture or forgotten boxes, but for something far more critical. I won't be here to shield him, she whispered one evening in the hospital, her frail fingers laced through mine. But I can still protect him from what's coming. We'll secure everything that matters, the trust papers, the will, copies of every financial record. And Richard, I want you to document it all, every warning sign, every manipulation tactic. So if someone enters his life and he's too blinded to see clearly, you'll have evidence. You'll have what you need to pull him out. At first, I thought fear was clouding her judgment. Michael was only 26, intelligent, independent, capable of standing on his own, but Catherine had grown up watching her mother lose everything to a stepfather who married her for money after her father died. She understood the pattern too well, so we followed through. We rented a climate-controlled unit downtown and stocked it with carefully organized files detailing every safeguard we'd established. The irrevocable trust holding our North York home, our investment portfolio, the life insurance policy, all of it structured so that Michael alone could ever access it, never a spouse, no matter how convincing. I had also kept a journal, 3 full years of notes about Sienna, every warning sign, every subtle manipulation, each moment she overstepped or made a deliberate move toward our family's wealth. I recorded all of it, certain that one day I would need undeniable evidence to show my son what I had recognized from the very beginning. That day had come. The flight home dragged on forever, 4.5 hours of turbulence and stale coffee, as I replayed the last 3 years in my head like a film I'd memorized. I sensed something was off the very first time Michael brought her to Sunday dinner. It was October, 3 years back, and he had that unmistakable glow of new love. Dad, there's someone I want you to meet, he'd said, practically beaming. Sienna arrived looking flawless, designer athleisure that couldn't have cost less than $300, blonde hair styled into a perfectly imperfect bun. In her hand, a bottle of wine I later discovered retailed for $85 for a first dinner with her boyfriend's father. "Mr. Morrison, it's truly a pleasure," she'd said, her tone dripping sweetness. "Michael has told me so much about you, and about this home. North York, isn't it? The real estate here must be incredibly valuable by now. What are these houses going for? Over $1 million? First warning sign. Who brings up property valuations over the salad course?" Throughout dinner, her curiosity came wrapped in politeness. "What line of work were you in before retiring?" "Insurance." "Oh, that must have been quite profitable." Then softly, "Michael mentioned you were married before. I'm so sorry for your loss. Did your wife have a career as well?" She wasn't making conversation. She was gathering data, quietly constructing a financial profile of our family, and Michael, God help him, saw none of it. He saw a stunning woman taking interest in his background, his father, and his history. Within 6 months, her strategy sharpened. She began planting ideas, gently nudging him toward financial discussions with me. Hadn't he ever wondered what he might inherit one day? Wasn't it only sensible to understand the scope of the family's holdings? One Sunday, Michael brought it up. "Sienna thinks we should go over your estate plan, Dad. She says if we're serious, we need clarity about our financial future." They had been together 8 months. "Your future," I replied evenly, "is to build your own success and your own savings. The same way I did. The same way your mother did." I caught the flicker of irritation in his expression. She had been preparing him, carefully reframing me as guarded, maybe even controlling. When he told me he planned to propose, a heaviness settled in my chest. The ring he showed me had cost $12,000, money he'd earned at the investment firm downtown. His eyes were full of hope, that fragile optimism only love can create. "I'm happy for you, son," I told him. And I was. I wanted him to have the kind of partnership Catherine and I had built, but deep down, I knew Sienna wasn't capable of offering that. The wedding was extravagant to the point of absurdity. She insisted on the Fairmont Royal York, $60,000 for the venue alone. The floral arrangements came to $18,000. Her gown was $12,000, and she purchased 3 additional dresses for the reception, claiming she needed variety for the photographs. Michael strained to cover his portion, too proud to ask me for assistance. I gave them $30,000 as a wedding gift. I saw the quick calculation in Sienna's eyes, the silent math estimating what that implied about my overall wealth. But I made other preparations. I contacted James Chen, the estate attorney Catherine had trusted, and ensured every safeguard was airtight. Then I required a prenuptial agreement. "It's standard for families with estates of this size," James explained calmly to both of them in his downtown office. "It's not personal, it simply protects premarital assets." Sienna signed without hesitation, barely skimming the pages. I suspect she believed it was procedural, something she could eventually maneuver around, persuading Michael to revise in time. She miscalculated. After the ceremony, the situation intensified. They moved into Michael's condo near the Distillery District, the property he had purchased long before she entered his life. Within 2 months, the complaints began. She said the condo felt cramped, too loud, and inconveniently far from her yoga studio in Yorkville. One Sunday at dinner, loud enough for me to catch every word, she floated another idea to Michael. "Why don't we just move in with your dad? Look at all this unused space. And Richard, you're not getting any younger. Wouldn't it be comforting to have family close by?" I ended that discussion on the spot. "This house remains exactly as it is. When I'm gone, it will belong to Michael to handle however he chooses. But as long as I'm alive, it's my home." Her smile stiffened, almost cracking. Behind her eyes, I could see her recalculating, adjusting the plan, searching for another route to what she believed should be hers. That was when I began the journal. I recorded every exchange, every subtle push, every warning sign. All of it went into a leather-bound notebook stored in the downtown unit, updated weekly without fail. My flight touched down at Pearson a little after 9 that evening. I collected my carry-on and headed straight for the parking garage. My phone vibrated repeatedly, messages from Michael stacking up. The police showed up. "Sienna's livid. She says you're acting paranoid and controlling. She keeps asking what you're hiding. Dad, please, can we talk when you get back? I don't understand what's happening." I drove through Toronto's night traffic, the CN Tower glowing against the dark skyline while I mapped out my next steps. First, inspect the storage unit. Second, bring James Chen into this. And finally, sit my son down and lay out the truth in full. When I pulled into the driveway in North York, both vehicles were parked outside, Michael's practical Honda and Sienna's BMW X5, the SUV she persuaded him to co-sign on just 9 months after the wedding. $82,000, monthly payments of $1,400, withdrawn from Michael's salary, while Sienna contributed nothing at all. I remained seated in the car for a few seconds, forcing myself to breathe. Catherine's voice rose in my mind as clearly as if she were beside me. "You're stronger than you realize, Richard. Protect our boy." Before I could reach for the door handle, the front door swung open. Michael stood there, shoulders slumped, tie loosened, his usually tidy hair in disarray. My son, who almost never showed strain, looked as though a single day had added 5 years to his life. "Dad," he said softly. "She's in the living room, waiting." Sienna stepped into view behind him. She was dressed simply, jeans, a soft cashmere sweater that couldn't have cost less than $400. But there was nothing relaxed about her posture. She carried herself like someone gearing up for a confrontation. "Richard," she said, her tone coated in artificial warmth, "we need to talk about honesty and openness in this family." I walked into my own house, the one Catherine and I purchased 4 decades ago, back when North York was still within reach. The house where we raised Michael, where every wall carried a memory. "Yes," I replied evenly. "I think we do." We arranged ourselves in the living room like opposing players awaiting the first move. I settled into my usual spot, the leather recliner Catherine gave me for my 60th birthday. Michael hovered at the edge of the sofa, tense, as if he might spring up and leave. Sienna positioned herself at the other end, spine straight, expression composed. "I'll get straight to the point," she began, not granting anyone else the floor. "I'm aware of the storage unit downtown. I know you've been withholding information from us, your own family, financial files, property deeds, legal documents that directly impact Michael's future." She tilted her head slightly. "That's not prudence, Richard. That's control." "Important documents are stored securely," I answered calmly. "That's called responsibility." "Secured from your son?" she asked, lifting a brow. "Or secured from me?" The words lingered between us. Michael kept his gaze fixed on his clasped hands, his jaw rigid. He looked like he wished he could sink straight into the couch and vanish. "Both," I answered, deciding there was no value in half-truths anymore. "The trust was created by your mother before she passed. It was structured to safeguard assets for Michael's future, assets that are legally separate from any marriage." Sienna let out a brittle laugh. "Separate from any marriage? So you arranged it so I would never have access to this family's wealth?" "I ensured that what Catherine and I built would pass to our son exactly the way she intended." "Dad," Michael's voice cracked with tension, "you should have told me. I deserved to know." The hurt in his eyes struck harder than any accusation Sienna could throw. This fracture between us, had always been my greatest fear, not her outrage, his pain. "You're right," I said quietly, holding his gaze. "I should have told you sooner. Your mother insisted on these protections because she watched her own mother lose everything after her father died. She made me swear you'd never face that kind of vulnerability." "The right moment?" Sienna echoed with a mocking tilt of her head. "Or were you waiting to see if I'd walk away, hoping our marriage would collapse so you could maintain your control?" "I was waiting," I said evenly, "to see whether your intentions would reveal themselves, and today, when you showed up with bolt cutters to force open my storage unit, they did." Her face flushed. "I have every right to understand what impacts my husband's future." "You have no claim to assets you neither built nor contributed to," I replied calmly. "Everything in that unit, every document, every safeguard Catherine established, exists to ensure our son is protected by those who love him for who he is, not for what he's worth." "That's not fair," Michael said quickly, but doubt trembled beneath his words. Sienna turned toward him, her expression softening with practiced ease. If I hadn't spent 3 years observing her patterns, I might have believed it was genuine. "Michael," she murmured gently, "your father has been controlling the narrative your whole life. Don't you understand?" she pressed, turning back to him. He's still trying to control you. Even now, he wants to wedge himself between us. I understand perfectly, I replied calmly. I understand that 6 months after the wedding, you persuaded Michael to co-sign an $82,000 vehicle. A car you chose, a car you drive, a car he pays for. Michael's head jerked up. How do you know the exact number? Because I pay attention to my son, I said. I notice when he stops talking about saving for a home because his income is suddenly diverted. I notice when he looks exhausted because he's working overtime to sustain expenses that didn't exist before. We needed dependable transportation, Sienna shot back. A dependable BMW? I asked evenly. Michael, what's the monthly payment? He hesitated. $1,400. And before that, what were you paying for your Honda? $450, he murmured. So you're spending $950 more each month because Sienna required a luxury SUV? I shifted my gaze to her. What else was essential? The Peloton for $3,000, the $12,000 furniture upgrade, the $9,000 trip to Turks and Caicos last year. I was creating a beautiful life for us, she said, but the confidence in her tone had begun to crack. You were spending funds you didn't earn while strategizing how to reach money you never built, I answered. I took out my phone and opened the email I had arranged before leaving Halifax. I spoke with James Chen earlier today. He confirmed that the prenuptial agreement you signed prior to the wedding is fully enforceable under Ontario law. She went completely still. What prenuptial agreement? The one you signed 3 days before the ceremony, the one James reviewed with you in his Bay Street office. The document stated clearly that all assets within the family trust remain separate property, and that in the event of divorce, you hold no entitlement to any premarital holdings. Color drained from her face as recollection overtook indignation. She had signed it without scrutiny, likely assuming it was routine paperwork, something she could outmaneuver in time. You deceived me, she breathed, her voice barely audible. I safeguarded my son. Michael looked between us as if we had both transformed into strangers. I don't get it, Sienna. You knew about the prenup. We discussed it. I thought it was routine, she snapped, her composure cracking. I didn't realize your father was deliberately shutting me out of everything. Everything that was never yours, I said evenly. The North York property is secured within a trust. The investment accounts are secured within a trust. My life insurance names Michael as sole beneficiary, with proceeds directed straight into that same trust. If I died tomorrow, you wouldn't receive a single cent. The quiet that followed felt heavy enough to press against the walls. Michael looked stunned, as though the ground beneath him had shifted. Sienna looked ready to erupt. So that's your plan? She said at last. Even if I remain married to your son for 50 years, I'll never truly belong here? You were never seeking belonging, I replied. You were calculating access. From my bag, I removed the leather journal I'd maintained for 3 years. I've kept records, Sienna. Every pattern, every attempt to steer conversations toward money, every warning sign. I opened a flagged entry. October 15th, 3 years ago, your first dinner here. Your exact words. These North York properties must be worth over $1 million now. You evaluated the house before you finished your first glass of wine. I turned a few pages. March 23rd, 2 years ago. You encouraged Michael to initiate discussions about estate planning and asset distribution. You had been dating for 8 months. Another page. July 9th, 18 months ago. You uploaded photos of my living room to Instagram, tagged the location, and framed it as your own residence. You were curating an image of affluence for your audience. That's insane, Sienna shot back, though her voice trembled. You've been spying on me, tracking my life like some kind of obsessed lunatic. I've been shielding my son from someone I believed was exploiting him. From my bag, I removed a stack of printed pages. These are screenshots of your Instagram direct messages. What you didn't realize is that when you logged onto my Wi-Fi network here, you accepted the usage terms. They clearly state that activity may be monitored. Color drained from her face. 6 months ago, you messaged your friend Amber, I continued. The old man's loaded but paranoid. Michael has no idea what they're actually worth. It'll take time, but I'll crack it. A faint wounded sound escaped Michael. And just last month, I added, you searched how to challenge a trust in Ontario and spousal entitlement to inherited property in Canada. This wasn't an accidental curiosity. This was strategy. She turned to Michael, panic bleeding into her tone. Don't let him twist this. He's trying to tear us apart. But Michael wasn't looking at her anymore. He was staring at his phone, scrolling slowly. His expression shifted from confusion to devastation. Your messages with Amber, he said flatly. They're synced to your iPad. I can see everything. There are dozens. About money, about convincing me to pressure Dad to transfer the house, about playing the long game. She lunged toward him, reaching for the device, but he stepped back. Oh my God, he whispered, reading. This one's from last week. Richard's in Halifax for 5 days. Perfect chance to check that storage unit. He's so secretive about it. Once I know what's inside, I'll know how to handle this. I can explain, Sienna began, but there was no explanation sufficient to erase those words. Michael's voice fractured. Were you ever even searching for a job? You told me you were applying for marketing roles. You told me you had interviews, Michael said, his voice barely steady. I was building our life, she insisted, though the words sounded rehearsed now. You haven't worked a single day since the wedding, I said evenly. You claimed you were job hunting, but for 3 years you've been spending his income without contributing anything? Michael dropped back onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. My son, the boy I had raised to be thoughtful and loyal, was realizing that the woman he had vowed to love had treated him like an opportunity instead of a partner. I think you should leave, he said at last, his tone quiet but firm. What? Pack your things. Go to your sister's, or get a hotel. I need space. I need you out of here so I can think. This is my home too, Sienna replied, the sweetness gone from her voice. We're married. You can't just throw me out. Actually, I interjected calmly, the condo is solely in Michael's name. He purchased it 2 years before he met you. Legally, you have no claim to it.
Her head snapped toward me. You arranged that too. I'm aware of how every asset my son owns is titled, I said. That isn't manipulation, Sienna. It's diligence. She looked from me to Michael, and for the first time, the confidence drained from her completely. What replaced it was fear. She understood the situation had shifted beyond her control. If I walk out that door, she said, her voice sharp with desperation, I'm not coming back. It was meant to be leveraged, a final attempt to force his hand. Michael met her gaze, tears slipping down his face. I know. The sound of suitcase wheels rolling across hardwood carried through the house like a closing chapter. It was close to midnight. I remained in the living room while Michael stood at the top of the stairs, listening as 3 years of marriage were reduced to 2 overpacked bags. Drawers slammed, footsteps pounded between bedroom and bathroom. She moved slowly, deliberately, perhaps waiting for him to call her back. He didn't. When she finally descended the stairs, she no longer resembled the composed, polished woman who had maneuvered her way into our lives. Her hair hung loose and tangled. Her face was blotched red, mascara streaked beneath her eyes. She hauled both suitcases behind her, keeping her gaze fixed anywhere but on us. At the door, she stopped. Michael, I'll need money for a hotel. He reached for his wallet with slow, mechanical movements and handed her 5 $20 bills. $100. Barely enough for a single night somewhere modest. She looked at the cash as if it were an insult. Your bank card still works, he said quietly. There's about $1,400 in the joint account. Take what you need. What I need, she replied with a hollow laugh, is for you to realize your father has turned you against me. She yanked the door open. Cold November air poured into the house, carrying the scent of damp leaves and the promise of winter. She lingered for a second, and I wondered if she would make one last attempt, one final plea or accusation to crack his resolve. She didn't. She stepped outside. The door shut with a muted click. Moments later, we heard the BMW engine ignite and fade into the Toronto night. The quiet that followed felt overwhelming. Michael stood motionless, staring at the door as though it might reopen. Then his shoulders began to tremble. He sank onto the bottom stair, burying his face in his hands as the sobs tore out of him. Raw, unfiltered, I sat down beside him, and he leaned into me the way he had when he was small. I wrapped my 67-year-old arms around my 38-year-old son as he fell apart. I'm so stupid, Dad, he choked. How did I not see it? You loved her, I said gently. Love has a way of showing us only what we want to believe. 3 years, he whispered. 3 years wasted on someone who was using me. Not wasted, I said firmly. You've learned about people, about yourself, about the kind of partner you truly deserve. Lessons aren't wasted, son. They're protection for the future. That's life, I said quietly. He leaned back, brushing tears from his face. You tried to warn me. I felt it. Your hesitation, your disapproval. But I convinced myself you were just being overprotective, that you couldn't let go. Meanwhile, you saw her clearly from the beginning. I've simply had more time to study people, I replied, and I wasn't blinded by love. He gave a weak, unsteady laugh. Mom would have spotted it too, wouldn't she? The moment Sienna stepped through that door, your mother would have understood exactly who she was. We stayed there on the staircase for a while, the house finally still. Then Michael straightened slightly. Tell me about the storage unit, he said. Tell me everything Mom arranged. No more holding back. So I told him. Sitting side by side on those stairs, I walked him through it all. How Catherine had spent her last months preparing for a future she knew she wouldn't see. How she worked closely with James Chen to design a structure that couldn't be dismantled, built specifically to shield Michael from someone like this. The trust holds the house, all the investments your mother and I accumulated, and the life insurance policy, I explained. Altogether, it's valued at roughly 1.8 million. His eyes widened. That much. Your mother had an extraordinary mind for finances. We lived below our means and invested with patience. The house alone is worth close to 900,000 now. The rest sits in diversified portfolios that have steadily grown, and it all transfers to me. When I pass, or if I decide to transfer control sooner, I said. Originally, your mother and I planned to do that on your 40th birthday. But after tonight, I think we should meet with James earlier. You need to fully understand what you have and how to safeguard it. The prenup, Michael said quietly. If we'd stayed married, would it really have protected everything? Completely, I answered without hesitation. James structured it so tightly that nothing could penetrate it. Even if you had stayed married for 50 years, the trust assets would have remained entirely separate. She would never have been able to access them. That's why she was so determined to get into that unit. She'd been trying for months to calculate exactly what existed. And because of the journal I kept, I have a record of every attempt, every financial question, every subtle push to make you pressure me. It's all written down. Michael sat in silence for a while. Can I read it? He asked finally. Tomorrow, I said. We'll go to the storage unit together. You can see everything. We stayed up talking until nearly 3 in the morning, about Catherine, about the safeguard she had carefully designed, about the 3 years Michael had given to someone who never truly loved him. Do you think she cared about me at all? He asked quietly. Even a little? That question hurt more than anything else. Maybe in her own limited way, I answered. But it wasn't the kind of love that builds a future. It was the kind that comes with conditions and backup plans. The next morning, we drove downtown to the storage facility on King Street. The manager, a gentle older man named Rajas, greeted us with visible relief. Mr. Morrison, I'm very glad you've returned, he said. Yesterday, that woman was extremely persistent. She was angry when I refused access. You handled it exactly right, Rajas. Thank you. I entered the code 7352. Catherine's birthday, March 7th, 1952. The lock is released with a soft click. The unit wasn't large, 3 meters by 3 meters, but it was arranged with precision. Filing cabinets lined one wall, each drawer labeled clearly. Financial statements, property deeds, legal agreements, insurance policies. But Michael's eyes drifted to the opposite side. Shelving units held carefully preserved photo albums, boxes of Catherine's personal items, her jewelry case, her favorite novels, a small collection of watercolor paintings she had created over the years as a quiet hobby. You kept all of this, Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. I couldn't, I said quietly. This became my place to remember her. That's the real reason I never wanted anyone else coming here. It was never just about the paperwork. It was about this. I wasn't ready to open it up to anyone. Michael moved toward the shelves and lifted a photo album. He flipped to a random page. There was Catherine, no older than 30, laughing at the camera at Niagara Falls, vibrant, healthy, alive in a way illness could never define. Sometimes I forget what she looked like before she got sick, he murmured. She was remarkable, I said softly. Sharp-minded, quick-witted, and stubborn as they come. Once she believed something was right, nothing could persuade her otherwise. He gently replaced the album and opened one of the filing drawers. Inside were neatly labeled folders in Catherine's precise handwriting. At the very front lay a sealed envelope with his name written across it. "What's this?" "A letter," I said. "She wrote it 2 weeks before she passed. She told me to give it to you when you were ready." His fingers shook as he broke the seal. Several pages filled edge to edge with her familiar script. He read silently while I stood nearby, remembering that afternoon, the weakness in her body, the strength in her will. By the time he reached the end, tears were slipping freely down his face. "She knew," he said hoarsely. "Even then, she knew I'd need protecting." "Your mother understood the world," I replied, "its kindness and its cruelty, and she loved you enough to prepare you for both." 6 months passed after that November night. 6 months since Sienna left with 2 suitcases and $100. 6 months of slow recovery, of rebuilding, of discovering what life felt like beyond deception. The divorce moved quickly, the prenuptial agreement leaving little room for dispute. She attempted, briefly, to contest it. She hired a lawyer who reviewed the documents and advised her to accept the terms offered. In the end, she walked away with exactly what she had entered the marriage with: her personal belongings and an $82,000 car loan she could no longer manage. The last update I got was that she'd relocated to Vancouver, filling Instagram with golden sunset backdrops and perfectly angled yoga shots, already scanning the horizon for her next opportunity. Michael ended up blocking her after she rang him 32 times in a single week, swinging wildly between tearful pleas for another chance and furious rants about how he was ruining everything. He didn't budge once. Sunday had slowly become ours again. Every week, like clockwork, Michael drove down to the house in North York for dinner. Some evenings we cooked side by side, bravely attempting Catherine's old recipes. Other times we grabbed Swiss Chalet and put on the Leafs game. But more than anything, we talked. "I met someone," Michael said, slicing into the chicken I'd miraculously cooked without burning. I glanced up, caught off guard, but genuinely happy. "It's nothing serious. Just coffee a few times. Her name's Rachel. She teaches at a school in Scarborough. We met at that conference I told you about last month." And then he smiled, not the forced kind, a real one, the kind that finally reached his eyes after months of distance. "She wouldn't let me pay," he added. "Said she has this rule about keeping things equal from day one." A quiet warmth spread through my chest. "Smart woman." I told her everything, he continued. About Sienna, the divorce, why it fell apart. I figured if that scared her off, better to find out early. "What did she say?" "She said her best friend went through something almost identical, got caught up with someone who saw bank accounts instead of a human being, so she understood." We finished eating in an easy, comfortable silence. After a moment, Michael placed his fork down carefully. "Dad, I owe you an apology for not believing you, for siding with Sienna every time you raised concerns, for making you feel like you had to walk on eggshells around me." "You don't apologize for loving someone," I said gently, "even if they turned out not to deserve it." He shook his head. "But I should apologize for being blind, for trying so hard to prove I was independent that I ignored every warning sign right in front of me." He hesitated, his expression shifting. "I've been thinking about Mom a lot lately, about everything she must have been carrying while she was planning for the future, knowing she didn't have one. She must have been terrified." I told him there were nights she'd bolt awake in tears, terrified about what the future would look like for you. Michael slipped a hand into his pocket and unfolded Catherine's letter, the paper soft and worn from being read over and over again. "There's a line she wrote that won't leave me," he said quietly. She said, "Real love doesn't come with passwords to bank accounts. Real love grows in the quiet moments, in shared burdens, in choosing each other, especially when it isn't easy." He swallowed. She was right. Sienna never chose me when things got complicated, but I learned from that. I learned exactly what I don't want, and I realized I'd rather stand on my own than stay with someone who only values what I can give them. I lifted my glass toward him. Your mother would be so proud. He tapped his glass gently against mine. The wine came from a bottle Catherine had bought 2 decades earlier, saving it for something meaningful. Somehow, this felt worthy of it. I've been thinking about the trust, Michael said after a moment, about what we should do with part of it. What are you thinking? Mom wanted me to feel secure, to have options, and she gave me that. But I've been in finance for 16 years now. I've built my own path, my own savings. I don't need every dollar of it just to stay afloat. She wanted you to be comfortable, I reminded him. I know, but I also believe she'd want it to matter. What if we created a scholarship for kids who lose a parent to cancer, help them afford university, give them the same sense of stability Mom tried to give me? Emotion tightened my throat. She would have loved that. We could name it the Catherine Morrison Memorial Scholarship, he continued. Keep enough in the trust to protect the house and leave a safety cushion, but use the rest to make a difference. Your mother would be unbelievably proud of you right now, I said softly. The rest of the night turned into planning numbers, ideas, possibilities. By the time Michael headed out, we had the framework for a scholarship that could support 5 students each year. Young people carrying grief but still chasing an education. As I stood at the window and watched his taillights fade down the street, a feeling settled over me. Not relief, not victory, peace, not just the absence of conflict, but something deeper. The comfort wasn't in the money. It was in knowing I had kept my promises, that Catherine's love had outlived her body, that our son was finally free to build the life he deserved. The storage unit downtown still held the documents, the safeguards, the layers of protection I had carefully put in place, but what it truly contained was no longer paper or legal strategy. It held memories, honor, a love story that began 45 years ago and in many ways was still being written. I stepped back inside and paused at the photograph on the mantel. Catherine was 35 in that picture. Bright smile, eyes alive with dreams we were still chasing back then. We did it, I whispered. He's okay. He's going to be just fine. And in the quiet, I could almost hear her relief mixed with that familiar pride she carried whenever one of our plans came together. She'd been gone 12 years, but she had never really left. She was in every protected asset, every value Michael carried, every Sunday dinner filled with laughter instead of fear. Sienna walked away with nothing because she never understood what mattered. She saw houses, accounts, investments, and thought that was the treasure. She missed the real wealth entirely. As I climbed the stairs that night, I thought about Michael's new beginning, about Rachel, the school teacher who insisted on paying for her own coffee, about the scholarship that would one day help children who had lost what Michael once lost. The lock on that storage unit was solid, but what it guarded now wasn't just documentation. It was proof that love can outlast death, that wisdom can be passed down, that character cannot be stolen, bought, or manipulated. And in the end, that is the only inheritance that truly matters. If this story touched your heart, consider subscribing to A Father's Wrath and turning on the notification bell. Every week, we share powerful true stories about legacy, justice, resilience, and the strength of family bonds that refuse to break. Leave a comment below. What legacy do you hope to leave behind? Your words might inspire someone to protect what truly matters. Thank you for reading. Cherish your loved ones, guard your values, and never underestimate the power of a promise kept.